and welcome everybody to the 3 things you must know to get a book contract or agent, starring the fabulous Mary Cole. My name is John Bard, and I am one of the owners of Writing Blueprints, and I'm joined over here by Laura. Laura is my wife. We're a family business. We've been doing this for almost 30 years. So here's what you're going to learn tonight. You will get the answer to the question, do I really need an agent? And it will be the answer that's right for you. You're going to get the 5 biggest manuscript submission mistakes and figure out how to avoid them. You will discover what agents and editors are really looking for, and you will get the chance, of course, to ask questions at our Q&A. Now, again, to reiterate, we are recording this, so if you have to leave, something happens, you're having connection problems, whatever, don't sweat it. The recording will be up tomorrow, and you can watch the entire thing, and you have a week to watch it. And of course, later we will be giving you that world premiere sneak peek at the upcoming Manuscript Submission Blueprint, which Mary has the instructor on, and Laura has collaborated with her to create something truly magnificent. So you'll be seeing that a little bit later. We want to welcome, of course, our existing blueprinters, and you guys have already made yourself known, and also our many newcomers. I know a lot of you are finding us for the very first time, and we want to welcome you. And we want to tell you that what you're going to learn about the blueprint system it's going to seem unusual to you. It's a very different way of approaching writing and revising, and in this particular case for this blueprint, getting published. So we just want to make you feel a little bit comfortable with what it is, because Mary will be referring to the blueprints throughout, and we want you to understand what it is. So basically, the concept of writing blueprints was this. We got frustrated with teaching writing the same way. We've been doing it for 25 years at that point, or a little bit more. And we taught the same way everybody else did, which is they dump a load of information on you about plot or dialogue or this or that. And you are expected, you as the writer, are expected to somehow kind of piece it all together. So you have this giant learning curve of filtering out what's right, what's wrong, what you need, what you don't need. And we were frustrated by it, you were frustrated by it, and so we invented an entirely different way, where we basically took any part of writing a manuscript, revising a manuscript, or getting published, and broke the process down into tiny steps. We found experts who helped us create step-by-step processes for doing these things, and made videos from the instructors to help you go through each step, and used forms, and you're going to see a form in just a minute. What this basically does is it takes the brains, in this case, of Mary Cole and Laura Backus, and puts them inside your brain. So you could function at their level because you're simply following the instructions that they're giving you. No learning curve, no frustration. You're simply acting at a much higher level. You always know what to do next, so you're never lost. Another thing that is included is we have Facebook groups, private Facebook groups for all of our blueprinters, and I know a lot of you are using them, where you can actually get help directly from the instructors and from Laura whenever you need it. So it's really almost like an ongoing mentorship thing. So really the goal was to try to give you the ability to take control, full control of your writing life, do everything step by step, not have to worry about figuring out all this information that's being dumped on you, and having somebody to help you as you go through it, and do it all at like a really cheap price, because we know how writers are, which is, I don't mean you're cheap. I mean, you don't have a lot of money. So this is what the line looks like right now, and you can see it's, in terms of the Kidlit world, it's pretty well filled out. Easy Reader is also in there. And then we have a couple that are moving beyond the Kidlit world. Magazine Writing Blueprint, which we launched a few months ago, is for any kind of magazine writer. Then on the bottom, you see that we have a couple of different ways of publishing your work. We have Self-Publishing Blueprint. We have Picture Ebook Mastery, which is about creating Kindle books. And with the addition next week of the manuscript submission, which is about getting an agent or getting published with an editor, we will have completed really everything you need to write your book, to revise it using Manuscript Magic, and get it published on your terms. You get to decide, do I want to self-publish? Do I want to do Kindle? Do I want to get an agent? Do I want to go right to a publisher? However you want to go, now you have the exact blueprint. And that's why it's called Writing Blueprints. This is what one looks like. And again, we'll take a look inside. But again, I just want you to see it so when Mary talks about it, you have a visual to work with. These are online tools. You have lifetime access to them, and they live online. So you log in, and in this case, this is what Manuscript Submission Blueprint is. And then when you click on something, you're going to get the video. And there's Mary. You'll get the video where Mary will walk you through this specific step, And then you'll get the form where you actually just follow the instructions, do what's asked of you, and then move on to the next step. So you really are never having to think about what I'm doing next. It's always about just following the instructions. And by the time you're done, you will have a really professional presentation, and you'll know exactly what to do with your manuscript and be ready to go. So that is, in a very, very short nutshell, the concept behind the Blueprint system. And we think we've innovated something real special, and we're really excited to share it with you. But first, we are even more excited to share with you Mary Cole. And I know a lot of you guys know Mary. Some of you, this is your first opportunity to meet her. But Mary has had a really varied career, and she's covered the publishing world from many different angles. So she understands it as an agent, as an editor, as an author, as a writing coach. She comes at it from all different angles, and she has I think one of the widest understandings of the publishing process that we've seen, and has a great way of taking all of that and making it very accessible to you, the writer. So here's what's going to happen. Mary lives somewhere in the wilds of Minnesota. It's probably a city, but to me, it's just all wilds, Minnesota.
The tundra.
The tundra. And we've had some connection things as we've practiced this. So we were a little bit worried about the connection, that it might not work. So what we've done is Mary has recorded her section of the teaching part tonight. I'm going to be playing it for you in a moment, but she's here. And she will be here, connection willing, for the Q&A part. So you're seeing her live on tape, and then just plain old live, okay?
My name is Mary Cole. Thank you for the introduction. And I am so happy to be sharing the Blueprint submission system with you. And this is just a sneak peek at some of the information you'll get when you get the system. Today, we're going to be talking about the 3 biggest questions that writers have about the submission process. So here they are summarized. Do I absolutely need an agent? What are the top 5 slush pile mistakes, and how do I avoid them? And what are agents and editors really looking for? So here we go. All right, big question 1. Level with me 100%. Do I absolutely need a literary agent? First, let's talk a little bit about what a literary agent does, because that's very germane to answering the question of whether or not you need one. So, as a former literary agent, you might think that what I have to say here will be, yes, you absolutely need an agent. In every case, every writer, every project needs representation, and that is just not the case. So that's a little bit of a sneak peek. I just wanted to get it out there because a lot of people do think that I might be biased toward the traditional system, toward the agent model. But I hope you find this section surprising in that I don't exactly take that approach. So let's get out of the way what a literary agent does first. So literary agents get paid a percentage of your potential sale to do some of the following. They connect you to publishers that they think might be a good fit for your project, and also for yourself as a writer, maybe for some of your long-term goals. They negotiate contracts on your behalf. So they have obviously a stake in your success, but maybe less of a personal and emotional stake in your success. And so they are able to step into negotiations, maybe negotiate more fearlessly. They have a lot more clout that they're bringing into the process. They can basically go in and represent you on your behalf, which is sort of exactly what the job description is. Maybe whereas a writer would get spooked because they want to not risk anything, not jeopardize the sale. So literary agents go in on your behalf. They're kind of your heavy when it comes to the negotiation process, and they do usually bring a lot of clout and experience to the negotiating table. They connect you to subsidiary rights opportunities, and so I did want to mention what that is. Usually, if you look at your project, you might think it's just a book, but agents and publishers tend to see it as there's this old image of the pie. So all of your different rights to things are slices of the pie. The right to publish it as a book is one piece of the pie. Okay, but the right to make it into a film, that is usually exploited by somebody else, a production studio, a movie studio in this case, is another piece of the pie. The right to publish it in Germany is another piece of the pie. Theme park rights exist and are another piece of the pie if they ever want to build a Harry Potter world of your book and your idea. That is also a sub-right that gets exploited by a separate company. And so each of these different publishers, film studios, merchandising companies, they can buy separate pieces of the pie, or a big company that does all of these things can buy the entire pie. And so that's what's meant by subsidiary rights or sub-rights. So agents, usually either the agent themselves is skilled at exploiting different pieces of that pie, or they're connected to different companies or different even co-agents that can exploit pieces of that sub-rights pie for you. So whereas you may not know where to go to get your character turned into a plush animal, if you're writing a children's book, say, a literary agent or one of their co-agents or the publisher themselves would be able to do that for you. And so all the different pieces of the pie could potentially be exploited, could potentially be revenue streams. So that is why sub-rights are important and part of what an agent does on your behalf. And then, of course, if you do end up in a really long-term good relationship with a literary agent, they're able to look at your next project, talk about ideas you might have, talk about your goals as a writer in terms of career, next projects. If you want to totally switch streams and start writing in a different genre, they might be able to steer you in that direction. So agents, at least the really, really good ones, are able to address bigger questions of you as an author and your career trajectory as well. So that's just part of what literary agents do. So what are they good for? Projects with a lot of commercial appeal rather than niche ideas. This shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. So what do I mean by commercial appeal? So this would be a book that has maybe a wide potential audience for a mass market, for a big trade publisher. If you're really writing something completely regional and there's a small regional press that you want to target, that's what I mean by a more niche idea. An agent may or may not be excited about something like that unless it is a personal specialty for them. But basically, agents make money by selling projects. They don't take money unless they sell your project. And so they want to focus on projects that they think have a high chance of selling and selling in a bigger way. This is the case with most agents. And so the more commercial a project is, the more sort of wider appeal that it has, the better for a lot of agents. Again, we talked about subsidiary rights on the last slide. So projects with potential for sales to foreign markets, for sales in Hollywood. Agents are especially interested in those because remember, they may not just want to make a book sale for you. They may want to have a piece of the film rights, the film option, merchandising sales, foreign sales. There's really good money if you exploit those rights to be had there. So agents are very interested there as well. Agents are great for getting into big publishers, and often they are the only way to get into a big publisher. So if you really have your eyes set on HarperCollins or Penguin Random House or Simon & Schuster, these bigger houses, then you need a literary agent because most major houses will not accept unagented submissions just off the street. They prefer to work with literary agents because that helps them focus their submission pipeline. Otherwise, they would be inundated with submissions. So the bigger houses have put a middleman between themselves and you, and that middleman is the literary agent. Agents are really good for strategically polishing manuscripts before submission. A lot of agents have been forced to be more and more editorial, which means that they will give you a layer of feedback on how to make your project as commercially appealing as possible, or as appealing toward a certain audience or toward a certain concept before submission, so you know that you're going to be going out with something that has a high degree of success. Although agents are not a magic bullet, when you get a literary agent, of course you have to celebrate, but know that it does not guarantee a sale. There are a lot of variables that come into the process. And then agents are really good for bringing clout to a contract negotiation, especially if they're in a bigger agency. They have a lot of name clients that the agency represents, and so a publisher for one of their biggest name clients is likely to take your negotiation more seriously, because they also want to keep the agent happy, the agency happy, and their big author, who's also represented by that agency, happy. So these are things that not a lot of writers think about. They don't think about kind of contracts that have already been negotiated by this agency that are going to be used to sort of boost your own negotiation points, but that is definitely part of the agent's magic. That being said, there are some cons to working with agents, and some writers and some projects are just not a good fit for the agency model. So once an agent has placed a book with a publisher on your behalf, they are the agent of record for that book, even if you part ways. So that means that the hard work that they've done could live for the life of copyright, as long as that book stays in print with that publisher. So they get that they are entitled to their percentage of the advance, any rights sales that go through that publisher, royalties for that book. They are the agent of record, even if you do end up severing the relationship. At some point, they still get a piece of the work that they did in placing that project. They may not be very interested in those smaller or niche projects. And to be completely honest with you, agents tend to go where the excitement is. And if a book doesn't sell as expected, or it goes through several submission rounds to publishers, doesn't sell, if excitement wanes, even good agents may lose a little bit of interest in your appeal as a client or the project's appeal if things don't shake out the way that everyone originally hoped. So there could be a little bit of kind of expectation management going on, and a little cooling of the relationship depending on how things shake out. It just happens, because they, again, will not make any money unless they sell something on your behalf. And then agents specialize. A lot of them do. It's kind of rare to find an agent who will represent absolutely everything, because that represents relationships with hundreds and hundreds of editors at various publishers. I was a children's literary agent. That was my specialty. And that was still building relationships with over 300 editors in the children's space. And so kind of jack of all trades agents, they don't really exist a lot, because they will have to keep a lot of contacts in their Rolodex and keep a lot of relationships vital in order to serve you. So a lot of them do specialize. And for example, if you start out writing cookbooks and then you want to write picture books and you have a cookbook agent, well, they're not really going to be an asset in your new endeavor. And so you may have to be looking for representation all over again if you do want to kind of switch categories. So that's another potential con of getting into one agent relationship if you end up needing another one down the road. So do I need an agent? If you have your sights set on a major publishing house, then absolutely. Your odds of getting into a major house via a roundabout channel, like for example, meeting an editor at a conference, it does happen, but the odds of actually striking success with that roundabout channel are low, to be completely honest with you. If you care a lot about the money, rather than placing your project with the best possible fit. So an agent will be able to negotiate more aggressively. They will get you into a bigger house. Bigger houses usually pay bigger, more substantial advances than small publishers are able to. So yeah, if you just want a bulldog in your corner, then a literary agent is absolutely the choice for you. And especially when it comes to film subsidiary rights, a lot of agencies are very well connected in Hollywood. A lot of Hollywood deals happen on the heels of a book deal or simultaneously as a book deal. And that is somewhere an agent can be very, very helpful in terms of generating buzz sort of across those sister industries. But what if it's not for you? You can be successful by submitting directly to publishers if Again, your book is specialized or niche. A lot of smaller publishers that do accept unagented submissions, they tend to specialize as well. And so if you have something that's perfect for a smaller publisher, you may be able to take it to them yourself with absolutely no problem. If you want complete control over your project, agents will have feedback for you. They will steer your project in a certain way. If that's not for you, you might even want to consider self-publishing. There's a really excellent self-publishing blueprint system available to you as well from Writing Blueprints that I would really check out if this is at all an interest area for you. But you know, an agent is going to give you feedback on your work. And so if that's not for you, then partnering with an agent is probably going to involve some friction in your case. If you just want to hire a lawyer to look over a book publishing contract, you should absolutely at least bare minimum do that. They may not negotiate with as much leverage on your behalf as an agent would, but I would still really involve an intellectual property lawyer familiar with publishing. That's the key. To at least look over your contract if you're going to be negotiating a contract yourself. But that's for a one-time fee. You don't owe them a percentage of anything going forward like you would an agent. And then if you do want to switch categories often and you don't want to be tied down to one agent or sort of one area of publishing, maybe you could have more success by partnering with several small publishers in all of your different interest areas. So the reality, unfortunately, is that this decision isn't 100% binding 100% of the time. Agents leave the business because their husbands drag them to Minnesota, or they die, or they fire you, or they get fired by you. So an agent relationship may not be forever, even if you find a really good one. So it's best to remain flexible. You can always find an agent later. A lot of writers get their start by going to a small press, getting a few contracts under their belt independently, and then once they're a little bit more established, they have a bit more of a history, getting an agent involved. That's always an option for you if you do want to remain a little bit more independent at first. And then some people go the opposite way. They can get established with the help of a literary agent. Remember, you still owe for the books that that agent has sold and are the agent of record on. But once you're established, some people do strike out with their own name, their own reputation, and they sort of are a free agent and ditch their representation. So it seems very clear cut initially, the should I get an agent, should I not question, but there are different shades of gray to consider. So big question number 2, what are the top 5 slush pile mistakes and how do I avoid them? To be honest with you, there are a lot more than 5 slush pile mistakes. And when you get the blueprint, I can't even summarize the number of tips that I give because it is this very, very meaty system. I think there's like 8 hours of instruction on there and tons of handouts. So it was kind of hard for me to actually boil it down to 5, but this is a grabby list and these are things that I really want you to know. So number 1, not doing research. So I harp on research. When you get the blueprint, you are going to just accuse me of being a dead horse beater because this is really like my number 1 point in the whole system. But research is so important. So sending to an agent who doesn't represent what you've written, or if you're approaching publishers directly, sending to an imprint that doesn't publish your type of book. This seems like such an obvious piece of advice, but you would not believe what I have seen keeping my own slush pile as a literary agent for 5 years. Not personalizing the query because you're sending to every agent or publisher under the sun. It just does not behoove you to be sloppy or generic when you are approaching something as potentially important to your career as this. Sending every agent the same query at an agency all at once, or submitting to several agents, several editors or imprints at the same house at once. This is a big no-no, and something that I get into when you get the blueprint is how to be selective about who you send to, and how to zero in on the one individual that seems most likely to be receptive to your project. Very, very important. And yeah, just basically, what really, really bugs me is the writer who is not intentional about the process. So if you're not putting time or care or deliberate intention into the research and submission process, you kind of, you deserve what you get a little bit if you do get a round of rejections. So the research process, there are hundreds of literary agents and publishers in the United States alone. Most of them have some kind of slant or angle or specialty. So that means you really do, again, my harping has begun. You need to find the agents and publishers who are the best fit for your project, for you as an author. You have to sort of like make a love connection a little bit. And in the blueprint, when you get it, there are so many tips on exactly how to narrow down this huge funnel of potential targets for your project, and really make a targeted list. So. And then figure out who you are. You know, a big part of doing research is knowing yourself first, because you are bringing yourself to the process. You're bringing your project to the process. So are you all business, or do you want to be guided and shepherded through the process by a partner, whether that's a small publisher that you submit to directly or a literary agent? Do you care about clout and name brand, or could you care less? You know, some people really, they want the clout of a shiny agency behind them, and some people, they don't really care as long as they found either an agent or a publisher to champion their work. So do you want a gun for big success, or are you more confident in a niche approach? And do you want to find a home for one project, or are you gearing up for a whole writing career? There are no wrong answers here, but who you are as a writer and what your project actually is actually a big piece of the research component. Further on that last point, not every book has massive worldwide bestseller appeal for ages 0 to 100, and that is actually okay. Marketers know that it's actually much more difficult to market one thing to all 8 billion of us than it is to market something to a much more focused audience, because then you can actually make inroads with getting your message to specific people instead of anyone and everyone. So your book may actually, if you open your mind a little bit and you kind of figure out who you are and what your goal is for this project, because a lot of writers, they don't even consider that different projects may have different goals and different lives and different outcomes. Your book, this one, may have a great life with a small press or even self-published. And the more you research the market, the more you will start to see what the market actually is and where you might fit in. Because this is a bonus tip. This is not one of my 5 slush pile mistakes. A bonus tip is when I hear a writer say, nobody's ever done anything like this, that's kind of a red flag, because that means that somebody either tried and it failed miserably, or people haven't tried for potentially a good reason. And so this idea that nobody's ever done anything like it, you may want to go back and try to puzzle out why before you sort of tout it as a big sales hook. So when you figure out who you are and what type of project you created, you're much more likely to start figuring out who can help you on that path. And that's why research is such a crucial part of the blueprint. So mistake number 2, not following submission guidelines. This one also seems obvious, but you would not believe what lovely individuals show up in the slush pile just with no idea what they're doing. And that's okay. You don't know what you don't know, which is why you're going to get the blueprint and be very much on top of it. So sending attachments, 99% of agents and publishers, they just won't accept them. Your email will get deleted, nothing further to do there. So don't send them. Well, how do you get around that? There's information for that in the blueprint, because there are, you know, if you have an illustration portfolio, if you have a picture book dummy, you're thinking, okay, well, how do I get my work in front of people? There are ways to do it. Just don't send an attachment, even if you think, yeah, but I'm really the exception. I could send my attachment, right? No, just don't do it. There are ways around it. Using the wrong email subject, using the wrong email address. A lot of agents and publishers, they have special boxes set up for their queries or their slush pile. And so if you don't follow submission guidelines to the letter, then you may end up in limbo and nobody can help you because nobody knows you're there. So that is why even if you find an editor's private email address, don't use it. They are not going to be nearly as receptive of your submission if you sort of work around their submission flow. Their submission flow is their submission flow for a reason. And so you're not being clever, you're being intrusive, and potentially you're just going to end up deleted. So unless you are participating in a Twitter or Facebook pitch contest, and when you get the blueprint, I cover those in a little bit more detail there. Trying again to make your way in through a side entrance is just not going to behoove you, because nobody wants to be bothered on Twitter unless they're participating in a pitch contest. Nobody wants to be bothered on Facebook. Nobody wants to be bothered on Instagram. Follow the submission guidelines. They actually set you up for success. They're not there to keep you out. They're there to help you get in. So snail mail submissions, for example, are much less of a thing than they were even when I started in 2008 in the publishing industry. There we would actually keep, and some people still do keep slush piles, but they're much less common. So for example, if they only want a query and the first 5 pages, even if it's snail mail, don't try to kind of sneak your way in. Again, anytime you think you're being sneaky, you're probably doing something that people are going to frown on for a reason, because people used to FedEx their entire manuscripts to literary agencies where I was reading that only wanted the first 5 pages. So snail mail submissions are not an excuse to send your brick to somebody. So follow submission guidelines. Writing a bad query letter. So query letters get so much emphasis, and I completely understand why. It's so much easier to think about controlling a 500-word or fewer, as it says right there, a 500-word letter instead of a 300-page novel. I get it. They seem like a foot in the door. They seem like your big shot. So when you get the blueprint, I devote so much time and so much attention on the query letter. But here, for the purposes of this webinar, I will say not getting the reader to care about your characters. There are a lot of strategies around this, but if you're not putting your character clearly on the page, if you're not putting your plot clearly on the page, you are wasting your opportunity with the query. Not identifying your category or your market clearly. The query is a pitch, and so you need to set the agent or publisher's expectations in terms of where you think you fit in, which is why doing some market research, figuring out where your project actually might end up on the shelves is a really, really good idea that sets you up for success on all of these different metrics, including the query letter. Ignoring potential sales hooks. Again, it is a pitch, even if you're writing fiction. So anytime that you sort of disregard things that could make your project more marketable, like picking a potential category, like thinking of a juicy sales hook, your query gets a little bit weaker. And then again, the long query letter is one of the absolute biggest faults that you could perpetrate in the query, because usually these queries are not very effective. They go into way too much irrelevant, unnecessary detail. And so really the word count isn't just there to be mean or arbitrary. It is there to push you in the right direction in writing a compelling query. Mistake number 4, this is my favorite slide, is making a bad impression in your query. It is phenomenally easy to do if you have unrealistic expectations. And so that's one of the reasons that I loved being asked to do this blueprint, was that I strongly believe in writers setting themselves up for success. I've been teaching about writing and publishing for 10 years, and that's one of my things. Why make a horrible impression when you can make a great impression, and all you need is this knowledge? And so I've just been dishing information for 10 years. This system, the Writing Blueprint Submission system, is just so much valuable information to help set you up for success. And so it's so easy to make a bad impression, but if you know a little bit about adjusting your own expectations and what else is going on in the slush, it's so easy to make a great, easygoing, and low maintenance impression. So for example, making a bad impression would be unrealistic comp titles. Everybody knows that comp titles can help bolster a query, but what fewer people know is that they have to be good comp titles, and more importantly, realistic comp titles. So if you're out there saying, my book is the Da Vinci Code meets Harry Potter, do not choose 2 huge blockbusters as your comp titles, because that immediately screams to me, the literary agent, or me, the publisher, that your expectations are way up there. Of course, everybody wants to be Harry Potter, but only one thing in the entire world has gotten to be Harry Potter. And so just maybe picking more down to earth or approachable comps would put you in a different category altogether and make a great impression. Same for putting the cart before the horse. If you've already cast the movie in your head, that's nice for you. Everybody wants their book to be made into a movie. It is not an unnatural or bad thing to want, but keep it out of the query letter, because it tells me immediately that, again, your expectations are a little bit mismatched with reality potentially. And then coming off as a jerk. So this is my favorite. I don't think anyone has ever said this to me necessarily, but my example here is, the bestseller train is pulling out of the station and I want you to get on board. Choo choo. So I don't think anybody has actually said that to me with a straight face, at least. But actually, I would, as a literary agent, get this response to rejections quite a lot. I've been called an idiot. I have been told that I'm missing out on the chance of a lifetime. It's just, it doesn't come off as terribly great. So everybody should think they're the bee's knees. Writers as a whole tend to be very hard on themselves, and I wish they were a little less hard, but maybe not into this territory necessarily. And then finally, mistake number 5, this is a super easy tip that everyone could use today. Exclusive submissions. Only grant an exclusive submission to people you have a relationship with. For example, if a literary agent has asked for you to revise and resubmit, it is accepted and very, very nice of you to grant them an exclusive submission on the revision that you've made using their comments, okay? But you can limit the time. Hey, you can have this for 3 months, for example. Otherwise, granting an exclusive submission just out of the blue for no reason gives you nothing. It gives you absolutely nothing. When I was agenting, I would get letters all the time that said, I want to work with you so badly. This is like college, early decision, early action. I'm submitting to you and only you. It did not move the needle for me in the slightest. And that writer ended up wasting valuable time, because my turnaround time is my turnaround time. If I take 6 to 8 weeks to read your submission, that's how long I'm going to take to read your exclusive submission. It's just not going to move you to the top of any piles. It's not going to make me consider you any differently, because I'm not representing an exclusive submission. I'm representing a really great manuscript. And so if the exclusive submission is wrapping a not so great manuscript, it's just not going to change anything for me. So simultaneous submissions, which is when you send to multiple agents or multiple publishers or both at the same time, they are a business reality. They are accepted in the publishing industry. All you need to do, and there's a lot more when you get the blueprint on kind of how to build your submission lists and with simultaneous submissions in mind, all you need to do somewhere in your query letter, just say, hey, please note this is a simultaneous submission. But unless you've worked with that agent or publisher on something, just don't grant exclusive submissions. Just don't do it. So big question number 3, what are agents and publishers really looking for? Good stuff done well. And here, I can feel you wanting to throw stuff at the screen because this is such a cheeky answer, but this is really the nuts and bolts of it. Very solid writing skills. This is your stock in trade. If you have errors in your manuscript, if you are mixed up on your and you're there, you are going to be rejected instantly. There are flawless manuscripts in the slush. And so now I'm a freelance editor. And one thing I tell my clients is just like, this is your stock in trade. This is your only tool as a writer. You need solid writing skills because if you're going to be there making fundamental errors, nobody is going to overlook them. It may seem mean-spirited or even petty, but if your manuscript is riddled with errors and you haven't even bothered to proofread it, it's, you know, why are you even barking up the writing tree, basically? Good storytelling. One of the most essential things that you can do to boost your storytelling skills is to get other eyes on your project. Ask beta readers, critique partners, or even a freelance editor. If you're making an emotional impact, that is the question you should be asking. This is often more important than literary firepower. So you may be over here polishing your beautiful images and descriptive scenes, but the emotional content, the character arc, the plot arc of your story, if you're writing fiction, these are the things that really, really are going to get you noticed in the slush. And then your specific categorization, you know, having an audience in mind when you write doesn't mean you're a sellout. A lot of my more serious literary clients and literary writers that I've talked to over the years, they have this knee-jerk rejection of writing to audience, writing to market, writing to category. But knowing who your audience might be, knowing who might enjoy your story, it'll help you guide yourself along the entire writing process. So it's just a strong choice if you want to write something for the consumption of others, not just to please yourself. And then a nice person to work with. This kind of like my choo-choo example. You can have an artistic temperament. Absolutely. These are the things that make wonderful writing possible, but you also want to come across as savvy, hence all the research that you're going to be doing, realistic, and easy to work with. The entire submission process is a chance to show off your work, but it's also an audition for you. You know how they say with a job interview, you're auditioning from the moment that you walk into the room. Well, these agents or publishers, I apologize for the dog noise in the background. Those were some dog tags. The entire submission process is also a preview into what an agent or publisher might expect working with you as a client, because ideally this is a lifelong business relationship that you're hoping to enter into. So, pardon me. So are you going to be calling them at midnight asking when Tom Cruise is going to read your manuscript? Or are you going to just come across as a hardworking, easygoing, realistic, and success-driven person? The latter is much more desirable in their view. They want somebody who will collaborate, revise, help promote the book if they take it on, and so the best thing that you can do is come across as a ready, willing, and able partner in the publishing process. And of course, agents and publishers are looking for submissions that fit their areas of interest and expertise, or that fill gaps in their list for what they've expressed that they want. So this is why research is so important, because as you learn about who's out there, I know it can seem incredibly overwhelming because there's hundreds and hundreds of people that work in publishing, but as you do your research, you'll learn, what are people looking for? What are they saying they're looking for? If they're a publisher, what other kind of books do they publish? What's their flavor as a publisher? And so this research really gives us a sense of who's out there and how you might make that love connection that I was talking about earlier. So what's the first step toward giving agents and editors what they're looking for? Create a dossier on each agent or editor who's a potential fit for your project with details on how to customize your queries. And this is a huge interest area. When you get the blueprint, we dive right into this. So I'm really excited to share that piece with you. And you'll see exactly how to do that next week. We have another webinar coming up in the run-up to this Manuscript Submission Blueprint launch, and I will actually take you through the process of research as I would do it as a former literary agent, looking to sort of match a manuscript with the exact right person that's going to champion it all the way to the finish line. So come check us out for the launch webinar next week. Thank you.
All right. So, and Mary, if you're nearby and you want to hop on and hang out with us, we'd love to have you now.
And all right, here I am.
And you know, one thing, Mary, we should have discussed. You just blew my sales pitch for next week, because I was planning on launching this by saying the Manuscript Submission Blueprint train is leaving the station. It's time to get on board. Choo choo. I was going to
choo.
And now it's not. And ignore the little box at the bottom right that says Magazine Writing Blueprint. Somebody named John forgot to update the slides. Sorry about that. So, okay, guys. I know it was a little pixelated. If you had a real big screen, we'll try to nail it down next time we have a video. But I want to know, who is excited at the thought of having Mary Cole side by side and available to you as a mentor through our Facebook group for every other time you submit a manuscript to a publisher or agent from here on out? Who's excited by that? Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you.
That's the opportunity you're going to have. I mean, you just got an amazing amount of information, and we have more great information for you next week. And I'm looking at the chat box, and people are absolutely thrilled by what they just got. They just did get a tremendous little education, and there's much more. So, are you ready? Do you want to take a sneak peek inside Manuscript Submission Blueprint? That is a rhetorical question, because you're getting it anyway, but I'm pretty sure you want to. So let's take a look at it. Let me go ahead and share. And so what you're looking at is Manuscript Submission Blueprint. And as I said, this is an online tool. Those of you who are new to us, you know, we have all those other blueprints. The nice thing about having it all on one site is every time you get a new blueprint, they all show up in the same place under My Courses. So everything you need is always in one place, one login, all of your tools, all of your submission, all of your blueprints, everything is right there. So first thing I'm going to do is just scroll through, and Mary and Laura, if you guys want to chime in on anything, feel free. Yeah. But we'll just kind of walk through it, and then I'm going to take you inside one of them. But I want you to see everything that's included. So the first is sort of your general introduction. You know, what literary agents do, what publishers do, are you ready to submit, and so on. And Laura, why don't you actually walk through it?
Yeah, and then Mary does this really great job of sort of grounding you in the process at the beginning. So, you know, understanding your different submission options, whether you want to submit directly to a publisher or go through an agent. And she gives you this great overview of the submission process, including how long it takes, which is really good, because I think having realistic expectations from the beginning are important, so that you don't get discouraged when it's suddenly, you know, 2 months later and you haven't heard back. That's normal. So knowing that up front is really good. And then we go through developing a submission strategy. And this is so important, because so many authors don't have a strategy when they start this process. They don't understand what kind of book they've got, which dictates the types of agents and editors you're going to be targeting. And then there's some great bonus videos where Mary demonstrates some research techniques and talks about particular research tools that are really, really useful. And then we go into building your submission package, which is really the, you know, the meat and potatoes here of the.
So, hey, can I interrupt just for a second?
Sure.
It looks like people are having trouble actually reading any of the words.
Yes, I'm going to see if I could zoom in a little bit here. It's a little hard.
Maybe we could zoom in, or maybe you can just read
Sure.
to us.
How about this? How about we'll just do the headings, the absolute.
Okay.
Perfect.
So Unit 1 is getting started,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where it's all the introductory information we just talked about. The bonus video is how to establish your early online presence. Unit 2 is understanding your submission options. So whether you're going for an agent or a publishing house.
Right.
Unit 3 is developing a submission strategy, which is what Laura was just talking about, where it goes step by step. And this includes research, building your submission list, and so on.
Right.
Then Unit 4 is building your submissions package. And here's where you're identifying your sales hook, your query letter, which again, as Mary mentioned, she spends a lot of time on. We actually give you sample query letters that have worked. Go ahead.
And then, you know, she explains how to write a synopsis with samples. Really, really valuable. And even goes into how to build a book proposal. This is for informational nonfiction, especially if you're writing for the adult market. And we have samples of those as well. So not only does she tell you what to do, she shows you, good job, Mary, with the actual samples, which is really, really important. And then we go into Unit 5, submitting your project. And we talk about pulling it all together into the package, sending it out, and then follow up and troubleshooting, which is really important, depending on what kind of answers you're getting. And then other opportunities to pitch your project. Here, Mary talks about going to conferences and doing online pitch contests. And there are worksheets on how to develop your pitch, so that if you are meeting an editor in person at a conference and you have to come up with that 1 or 2 sentence pitch for your manuscript, you already have worked it out on these worksheets that we have here. Really, really important. Then your post-submission strategies.
That's Unit 7 right here, post-submission strategies.
Dealing with types of rejection. What if you get an offer? What happens then? What if an editor is interested before an agent? You can submit to both at the same time. But what if, on the off chance, you get an offer from an editor and then you want to find an agent? Mary talks about that. And then regrouping and resubmitting. If you've got rejections, what do you do? How do you regroup? How do you aggregate your feedback? And what do you do with that before you start resubmitting? And then Unit 8, if you get representation or a deal, she talks about what to expect, which is really important. And then Unit 9, if you're still on the hunt, she talks a little bit about independent publishing, if you want to look at that option. And then Unit 10, it's just sort of a nice wrap up. Mary gives a great pitch for the love of writing and sticking with it. Then
you get discounts to all the other blueprints too. So let's take a look inside. Maybe Mary, you can talk to us a little bit about this section, which is Unit 1, Step 5. Are you really ready to submit? So we're going to just let it build. And now we're sharing the screen, so it's a little bit slow. But this is how it goes. Start with the video.
Before we get into the nitty.
And then here is the form, and everything is form-based. So Mary, go ahead and just talk a little bit about this form and what it's going to help people do.
Yes, absolutely. So I know a lot of people are having some issues seeing things. People are commenting about a black box, but if you are able to see it, so I love this interface, by the way. This is something that really sold me on wanting to participate and build a blueprint. For you guys it's so fun and easy to use. What you saw above that started playing was a video, and that is I think 8 to 10 hours of instruction that I recorded over the course of a year, actually. And again, if it's blurry on the screen, that is just an issue here. For this broadcast, it's not actually going to be blurry. I have also developed 35 or so handouts with Laura's gracious help. So this is, are you submission ready? And that's one question that every writer comes to me with. Ooh, it's getting sharper. I love it. You guys are doing it.
I just had secret technique.
You did the secret technique. Perfect. So this is going to be a really meaty handout all about how to determine whether or not you are actually ready to pull the trigger. And one of the things that I see all the time from writers who are now editorial clients or writers in the slush pile when I was agenting is, I mean, you are seeing, I think it's a 5-page handout here of questions really trying to get you to evaluate yourself and whether or not you have checked all the boxes that you need to check before you're ready to submit. One of the biggest flaws that I used to see in the slush was just people typing the end on their manuscript and then sending it out and not realizing that there's a lot more involved in the process. And so this is kind of this checklist that'll keep you from making that same completely understandable but slightly hasty error before you do actually put your submission together. So this actually comes a little later in the process. This is when you are assembling everything that you have worked hard up until this point with, again, 8 to 10 hours of video instruction, 35 handouts to put together. This is kind of, do you have that submission ready mindset? Because believe it or not, the submission game is actually largely mental. So here you get a preview of something that's going to accompany one of the videos. And if it were me and I had, and toner was flowing, I would print out all of these handouts because I'm a paper and pen type of gal. So I would absolutely try to fill this in and really analyze myself before pulling that ripcord, because once you do go out on submission, the game completely changes, and there are units to cover that part of the process as well.
Mm-hmm. And all of these forms are, you can either fill them in electronically and then save them on your computer in whatever file system works for you, or you can print them out and fill them in by hand. So we've given you both options because different people like to work differently. But the nice thing is you can print out as many copies as you want. So you can fill it out 5 different times if you want until you get the answers that you're comfortable with.
One thing I did want to mention there, the handouts aren't just questions and blanks. So it's not just a lot of blank space on the page. If you did see that handout, you'll see that there's a lot of instruction actually on the handout itself. So they're meaty handouts that have a lot of reading material included in them as well. They're not just, you know, true, false, or,
right,
or whatever bullet points on
exactly.
the
And by the way, I am learning more things about our webinar platform tonight than I ever have. I figured out how to make everything not blurry. So I hope you guys can see that now, nice and clear. And you know, one thing that also that people maybe don't recognize about Blueprints, if you're new to us, the point of this is not a course. It's a tool that you just simply use over and over. So every time you want to put together a submission package, you just go through it and do it along with Mary. So it's meant to really be your kind of lifetime partner in submitting.
We always have dogs on our webinars, so.
And everybody has dogs, apparently.
That's a good thing.
All right, let me go ahead and get our screen back up here with the. So next week is the launch event. You guys, if you're here tonight, you have been registered. You're good to go. You'll get the instructions on how to come for that. And this is what Mary will be teaching you next week, why researching agents and publishers isn't your first step in the submission process. She started to talk a little bit about research. Next week, you're going to learn a lot more about research. She's going to give you resources to help you target your submissions, teach you how to use the data that you've gathered, and how to improve your odds of success. And then, of course, you will get the special one-time only price that we do only during the launch for the entire bundle. We have all sorts of, you want to mention real quick some of the things in the bundle, just 1 or 2 things?
There's some awesome things in the bundle. So there is a website walkthrough where Mary actually shows you in real time how to do some really great submission on publishers and agents using some really high-end resources that exist online, which is really exciting. We also have a great interview with agent John Cusick, who is also a writer. So he was able to talk about being a writer and being an agent, and that was a really wonderful interview that Mary did with him. And then I have an interview with 3 authors who each found their way to publication a little differently, either submitting directly to publishers or submitting through agents, and they're going to talk about their experiences as a bonus video as well. And then we have our 2 other bonus.
We have more. Those will be surprises for next week
that you'll have to find out about next week.
So the day is, it is the same time, next Tuesday, same night. And again, we'll be sending you all the information. And someone's asking for the price already. We can't tell them the price now.
John likes to do the big reveal.
Well, I'll tell you this: the regular price for all of our blueprints, and this one too, will be $197. That's lifetime. It's not like a monthly thing or you have to keep paying or anything. You buy it once, you get it lifetime, and that includes all the updates and the Facebook group where you get to interact with Mary and Laura. That's the regular price. Next week will be much, much, much lower than that, and that's all I can tell you. Won't be anywhere near $197, which is a good price too, but not your price.
All right.
All right. So it is time now to ask some questions, and again, you can put them in the Q&A box, and let me open up the Q&A and see what's
Great. Do you guys want to pick some, or I have a few
Yeah.
that I've been scrolling through that I'd like to answer. If you
Go
don't-
ahead. You go ahead and do that.
All right. So, like we've been saying, next week I'm actually going to do a research walkthrough how I would research some literary agents and some tools that I use. But two people are asking here, you know, how does one identify? So Nancy asked, how does one identify a skilled agent? And Arlene asked, how can you tell a good agent from a bad one? And these are really great questions, because the reality is anybody could hang a shingle out and say, I'm a literary agent, I will represent your work, just send me your stuff. And outside of the AAR, the Association of Author Representatives, there aren't really a lot of bodies of certifying bodies that kind of keep everybody in check. So we've seen agencies just go up in flames. We've seen agents disappear. Unfortunately, this is not a very regulated business. There's no medical license for being a literary agent. And so one of the most powerful tools that I do recommend next week, and I'll kind of give a little advanced blurb for it now, is a paid resource. It's Publishers Marketplace. You can join for 1 month. It's very reasonable, $25 a month. Sales. That is how you tell a good agent from a bad agent. This is how you tell who the agent is selling to. And I will talk all about this in the launch webinar, which is next week, the 22nd, same time. I will talk all about it, but you can see who agents are selling to. Are they selling to actual publishers, or do they not have a track record at all, but they're just really active and charming on Twitter? That happens. You want to send your work to somebody who's actually selling books, because that is what you want out of a literary agent. So you want to make sure that they are making sales. Now, some of this data is available elsewhere online, but Publishers Marketplace is the #1 resource that I recommend for making sure that the agents you're targeting have a track record. If they don't have sales, you are unfortunately maybe somebody's first client. You are maybe going out on a limb with an agent. And I don't know if I necessarily want to be in that position if I am asking somebody to shepherd my creative work through the publishing process. And so sales. Again, these are trackable things. These are things that you can research when you do your agent research. Again, beating that dead horse of research. This is something that you absolutely can have tangible evidence of. And it is probably, if I were looking for an agent today, the #1 thing that I would look at. I would look at their website. I would look at their online presence. I would read interviews by the agent, all of this other great stuff. But anybody can be anybody online. And that's one of the things that you really, really need to remember before you entrust somebody with your creative work. You want a track record, and sales is the #1 metric, at least for me. I'm very kind of results oriented. So there are a lot of questions here about personalizing query letters. How do you do it? How personal is too personal? This is just the bulk. When you get the blueprint, the bulk of the research chapter is all about this and that personalization piece. So you have the research that you do. How do you then use it? So I hate to be a tease about that, but there is just so much advice in the actual blueprint on how to personalize effectively without coming across as a little bit overbearing. Arlene asks, will the blueprint have copies of successful query letters? And I am so happy to report that we've put together a bundle of query letters that have actually gotten representation, that have gotten book deals. There are query letters for projects that are still out there that haven't been scooped up. And I have commented on all of those query letters with improvements to make to the query letter, what works, what doesn't. and why. And I've also included synopses. Synopses drive people crazy. So do query letters. And so I really wanted to have actionable, tangible, real live query letters to give you guys as examples. So that's something amazing that you're going to get as part of the blueprint. You don't have a lot of opportunities just writing your own query letter to see what other writers are doing and what has worked for other writers. So this was a really, really important part of the resource for me to put together for you guys. So that I am especially excited about. Let's see here. I can't really talk and read at the same time.
Mary, a lot of people are asking questions about the formatting for submissions, and you do go into that quite a bit in the blueprint, especially for email submissions, because those are formatted a little differently than snail mail. So people ask if it should be single-spaced or double-spaced as far as the sample pages, that kind of thing. Can you give us a real quick answer on that? I know, like I said, you go into it in the blueprint quite a bit.
Absolutely. So formatting is a bugaboo for a lot of people. The dirty truth is you can never know how your emails are looking to other people because you don't know how your email client, I use a lot of Gmail, but somebody else uses Outlook. A lot of publishers, for example, a lot of editors use Outlook. And so I don't really know what they're seeing on the receiving end. So people can drive themselves very, very crazy about formatting, but the real fact of the matter is you can't 100% guarantee how things are coming across to somebody that's receiving your submission. So the best advice is to keep it as simple as humanly possible. A lot of problems crop up when you copy and paste from Word. A lot of novelists who are sending sample materials, that's exactly what they're doing. And they're trying to maintain their indents. They're trying to maintain double spacing for their manuscripts themselves. Now, queries are traditionally single-spaced, so you have less of a problem there. Synopses can be either single-spaced or double-spaced, and manuscript samples are generally double-spaced. All of this can go down the tubes when you're pasting into email. And so the best advice that I can give is to copy and paste everything into an email, send the email to yourself to see how the email reads, and then copy and paste from that emailed version out into all the emails that you'll be populating with the various people you're submitting to. That way you can kind of see if there are going to be any issues and sort of correct for them ahead of time. And things like, you know, putting the addresses at the top, that's a letter writing convention that I would sort of do away with. The email formatting is a big piece of the submission blueprint. So, so for just more bare bones tips like that, you'll have to tune in.
So one thing I want to point out for folks that are tuning in, and obviously Mary is a font of wisdom, and you're getting a lot of information. Now, traditionally, pre-blueprint, you'd be sitting there thinking, oh my God, this is a lot of information. How do I remember this? Where do I take the notes? How do I remember that you don't need to put the address in? And you can all relax because it's all in the blueprint and it only shows up exactly when you need it to show up. Right. So it's great to know all this stuff, but it's not your job, and it shouldn't ever have been your job, frankly, to try to synthesize all this and make sense of it. Someone should have done it for you. We finally did. It took us 25 years, but you know, we did. And so don't worry about it. Just sit back and let the kind of wisdom wash over you and know that it'll be there for you when you need it.
Yep. So Mary, there's a couple questions about, can you have more than one agent if you're writing different kinds of books? So what is your advice on that?
Yes, absolutely. Now, there is a section later in the blueprint all about how to maybe navigate, hey, if a publisher has expressed interest and an agent has expressed interest. So this kind of tightrope diplomacy that you may very well get into if you are submitting. That's part of the submission process. I cover a lot of potential scenarios in the blueprint. We talk through a lot of things that could happen. Now, one of the things that could happen, as I mentioned in this webinar, is you want to write for multiple categories and you've landed a really great picture book agent, but now you want to write cookbooks. Your picture book agent can't help you. Usually it is not it is not beyond the pale to have more than one agent, but the divisions between that, they tend to be pretty specific. For example, when I was with Andrea Brown, we represented only children's authors. But that meant I would represent all of the children's projects. You know, if I saw a place for them, if I saw opportunity for them, if I liked them and wanted to take them on, I would want somebody's entire children's portfolio. And then if they had an adult thriller that they were also writing, or again, that cookbook example, they could go and they could find themselves a cookbook agent or an adult thriller agent. As long as I knew about it, as long as that other agent knew about it, if you take on multiple representation, you need to make sure that everybody knows about everybody, and that you're being very, very clear about communication. Now, there are some agents who want to be your only agent, and if they don't represent what you want to write, then that's kind of tough. It is very much an individual decision on the agent's part, whether they want to work in a collaborative sort of atmosphere like that with you, or if they don't. And if you feel like this may be something that you want to deal with at some point, and you may want to write in multiple categories, if an agent does express interest, I would highly recommend kind of floating this balloon to them in your early conversations so that they know it could be on the table later, and kind of get a read for how they might react to you floating that idea, because nobody really wants to be surprised 5 years into a relationship that you're going to start poking around and looking for other representation. The reason that it could become problematic is if, for example, you have an adult thriller idea and you work on it for 3 years with your adult thriller agent, but it doesn't go anywhere. And then you decide, you know what, the reason it's not working is because this is actually a YA idea. And then you take it to your YA agent. Well, your adult agent is going to be like, excuse me, I developed that idea with you for 3 years, and I feel entitled to be able to represent this manuscript still. I don't want you giving it, pardon me, to your other agent. And so things could get messy, which is why I always advocate, just above all else, for clear communication about your intentions with everybody potentially involved.
Just a couple of quick points here. First of all, obviously you guys have tons of great questions and we can't possibly answer them tonight. So if we don't, hang on to them, and then when you get Blueprint, ask them in the Facebook group, and you will definitely get an answer. That's where Mary and Laura will be hanging out and helping you out there. A couple of things I wanted to touch on here. Alexa says, I'm not available for the webinar next Tuesday night. Is there another time I can view it and purchase the Blueprint? That's Linda. We're the same way. We're going to record the launch webinar, and usually we have a 4-day period where the launch price is available and the bundle is available. Sometimes people who buy live during the webinar, we have what's called a fast action bonus, and they get it, but we try to carry them over as best we can. So don't worry about it. If you can't make it next Tuesday, same deal. It's all being recorded, but we love to have you. We love the energy of having a lot of folks live with us during the launch, but don't sweat it if you can't make it. And then where was this one here about?
There were a couple questions about forms to track your submissions.
Right. So ask,
yes.
Is everything video and forms? And are there forms to help you track your submissions?
Yes, we have a couple forms that we've created that actually help you accumulate all your research information on the agents and the editors, and then create a list of who you're going to submit to and in what order. And then another form to keep track of when you submitted, who you submitted to, what your response was, and any feedback you got. And those are in the Blueprint. And those, again, are electronically fillable, or you can print them out. Those particular forms, I would really recommend filling in electronically, because the fields will expand, so you can type as much information as you want into each field, and you'll have enough room. So yes, we do have those.
Joanne asked the difference between this product and Manuscript Magic. Manuscript Magic is about how to revise your manuscript at the level of a very high editor, critiquer. So it comes before this, potentially, if you really want to kind of do it the right way. Manuscript Magic allows you to really get your manuscript perfect, and then you would use Manuscript Submission Blueprint to get it out into the world, to get it to agents, to get it to publishing houses.
Right. Well, John, scrolling through these questions, Mary, I saw one from Carol asking, is it ever okay to send a follow-up email to an agent or editor if you haven't heard back? And how do you handle this if they say no news, no response means no, and they're not going to give you a firm response on your submission? Do you just sort of hope they got it? How do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, everybody kind of keeps their own guidelines for how they deal with responding to queries. Unfortunately, the time of being able to respond to everybody has passed for a lot of agents. And so some simply, this will all be in your submission guidelines that you read and research for every agency. But some will say, you know, yeah, my response period is 6 weeks. And if you don't hear, unfortunately, it's a pass. Some will say, I respond to everybody within 8 weeks. You may want to use some of the resources included in the blueprint to notate everybody's individual response style. Now, it's very rare that submission does fall through the cracks and they don't get it. They don't consider it within their time period, but it does happen. I would say the rule of thumb there would be if they've stated a response time, let's say I respond to everything within 8 weeks, that is very clear cut. After 8 weeks, if you haven't received a response, it is very obvious what you can do. You can check in with them and say, hey, your response period has passed and I just wanted to check in on my submission from date or of title or whatever. That's totally fine. Now, if it's one of those agents that does not respond, they only respond if interested is another way of phrasing it. You can, I would say, give it 2 or 3 months or whatever it is past their stated response window. If they've provided that in their submission guidelines, you can check in. But at the same time, if it is one of these low response agents, then that might just be their style. And the hard truth, and we do cover this a lot in the blueprint, in the next steps and kind of synthesizing feedback and rejection units. Sometimes you never will know on a submission, especially from an agent who has already expressed that they don't respond to everything. That's hard. It's very difficult to leave a submission without closure. But unfortunately, the market reality is that agents receive 10 to 15,000 submissions. That's kind of an average. But an anecdotal average, so it could be a lot more for some people, and it's just unrealistic to them to respond to everything. I would say if you've checked in once in addition to your submission, you need to leave it no matter what, because you're not necessarily going to generate a response if you keep checking in.
Right.
Ian has a question.
Yeah, and I think this is a good one because we do have a lot of customers who are out of the country. And he's in Canada and he's saying, is it worthwhile for him to research American agents and publishers, or does he need to stay within his own country? So in your experience, Mary, are agents and publishers open to taking clients from other countries?
The great news is that the world is flat now. I personally, as a freelance editor, I work with people. I was writing with Hungary today. I work with clients all over the globe, and a lot of them do want to publish in the US market. So that is the consideration. Do you want to publish in the Canadian market? Do you want to publish in the UK or the Commonwealth market? Do you want to publish in the US market? If you see your story for whatever reason being really successful in the US market, then it would behoove you to research agents representing in the US market and try to sell into the US market. But for example, if you, I have a US client who has written a very UK friendly manuscript set in the UK using a lot of elements that would be popular in the UK market. They're going to query UK literary agents and try to sell to a UK publisher. So it's not so much should you stick to your own territory, it's deciding where would my manuscript be a good fit. And so if for whatever reason you decide that the Canadian market is too limited for what you want to do or what you want the project to accomplish, it is absolutely not prohibitive being a Canadian writer or being a Canadian client to query the US market, because you just think that your book has more potential selling into the US market. And agents, as far as anything that I've ever heard, I used to have clients internationally. Being not based in the US is not prohibitive. A lot of the marketing that you will end up doing is going to be internet based, or travel is always an option. And so writers from all over the world are able to participate in whatever market they end up published in. So it's absolutely up to you. That's just a decision that you have to make.
And everything in the blueprint is applicable for wherever you're submitting.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
The research process is the same, whether you're researching an agency in America or in the UK, you're going to go through the same steps. So I think it's very applicable.
Why don't we do 2 more questions, because otherwise we could be here all night.
We could be here all night.
And you guys
I have not eaten dinner, so yes.
These are such excellent
If you want to see me hangry.
I love our people because
Yes.
they're so smart. And so again, please take these questions, and after next week when you're with Manuscript Submission Blueprint, bring them up in the Facebook group. We promise I'll get answered, and anything else you need.
Right.
And that's not just for a couple of days. This is from here on out. You have friends in
That's right.
the Manuscript Submission.
And I want to answer this one question real quick. Is there information on writing a book proposal for nonfiction in the blueprint? Yes. And Mary not only gives you information, there are 2 actual sample book proposals.
One of them is mine. This
One
is
of them
like
is
me
hers.
airing my dirty laundry, but I am the author of Writing Irresistible Kidlit, which is a writing reference book, and I share my proposal, and I even critique myself. There are things I could have done better in my own proposal, so I share with you guys.
So it's very valuable. And then one more here, because this is an interesting question I get asked a lot. If you have self-published a book and you want to see if you can get it traditionally published or get an agent for it, can you do that? Do you send the agent a copy of the book? How do you go about querying an agent on that kind of project?
Yes, this is a question that I deal with a lot in my editorial practice as well. It's something that I saw a lot when I was agenting. There are writers who do choose to independently publish, and then they realize that they'd really rather go the traditional route after all, because it is difficult. It represents an entirely new skill set of marketing that a lot of people didn't anticipate going into the process. And so they're like, okay, never mind. I would really like to try querying this around again. Maybe I've learned a lot, blah, blah, blah. So it is more difficult to go that route because unfortunately the book is considered published by a lot of people. Now, you do hear these success stories of people who have published independently and then gotten scooped up, but what was generating a lot of that excitement behind the scooping was sales. So if you are able to self-publish and demonstrate that you can get consistent sales and consistent interest in the marketplace yourself, that will tell an agent or publisher that you have a product that is worthwhile and you are a person who can do marketing. Both of these things are huge assets. So if you have self-published and you have sold a negligible number of copies, know that your sales record will be one of the big questions that an agent or publisher will ask. You should not probably be deceitful about the history of the project. I have a lot of people who are like, I'll just take it off Amazon and we can pretend the whole thing never happened. That's something that's its own bucket of worms. But I would say that you absolutely can query a self-published project, but there are more obstacles in your way. And an agent or publisher will want to see a demonstrated success record. The process is very much the same. So everything that you learn in the Manuscript Submission Blueprint will apply to self-published projects and trying to pitch them around. But do know that within the industry, those projects are considered already published. And unless there is demonstrable evidence for a publisher wanting to scoop it up and try to make it even bigger, you're going to have some obstacles with that route. It's not entirely impossible at all. I'm actually working with a few clients in my editorial practice right now that are gearing up for this exact thing. But the reality is this is a harder row to hoe.
Okay. Two quick little points here, and then I do have one last question I want to
Yes.
ask. So first of all, somebody asked, and I mentioned this early on, but I'll mention it again. Manuscript Submission Blueprint is for all genres of writing, adult and children's, fiction and nonfiction. If you're trying to get a book published or get representation, the odds are extremely high this will all be completely applicable to you. The second thing is, Jenny asked the difference between an agent and an editor, because we use those phrases. So when we say editor, it's really kind of shorthand for publishing house. So it's either going and getting a literary agent to represent you or submitting it to a publishing house where you would be, your conduit there would be an editor.
Right.
So just the shorthand there so you're not confused. And finally, I have a question, and I want to ask it because we love encouraging young writers. So Lenny asks, I'm under 18 years old. If I tell my age, will an agent automatically reject my submission? Should I even mention my age?
This is a really good question, and I actually do work with a lot of younger writers in my editorial line of work, and they all are always curious. Should I disclose that I am a prodigy, if you will? And this gets a little bit tricky because as available as agents and publishers are online, as much information as they do make known about themselves, there are certain things that we cannot know. And everybody has their own opinion about young writers. Some people love working with young writers. They think they're great. They think that this could be the beginning of a beautiful lifelong friendship. Other people see young writers as problematic. They have to work with their parents in a legal capacity to represent them. You know, there are sometimes considerations that an agent would see that a writer wouldn't necessarily see that are problematic about working with young writers. Now, we have Christopher Paolini and all of these young writer prodigy examples that are very much to recommend working with young writers. And so I do think that it can be a selling point, and some people definitely see it as a selling point. But whether or not you end up finding an agent that feels similarly, and whether or not you want to advertise your age as part of your pitch, those are very, very individual decisions. Now, if you do feel like it's an asset for you, if you think that it's something that you do want to make part of your author identity, I would put it in your pitch and see if you connect with somebody. Some people do reject young writers out of hand, but again, people either tend to love them or to not be at all impressed by them. And it really is kind of a polarizing issue. If you do feel like concealing your age would be better, you would be taken more seriously, or whatever the case may be, you are absolutely not required to put that detail in your query. And maybe if you do get interest from an agent, it's something where you could blow their minds at the end of the phone call. But this is something, you know, I love working with young writers. I think it's a tremendous asset. But not everybody agrees. And sometimes, even with all the research in the world, there are things that we cannot know about how an agent will respond. So then it becomes all about your sensibility and whether you want to share that detail or not.
Awesome. Well, Mary, you are getting massive applause in the chat box.
Thank you.
And guys, if you like this, just wait till next week. That's all I can say. But thank you all so much. And thank you guys for your great questions and your great interest and all the kind words that we see in the chat box. We really appreciate that. Again, next week, same time, and you will get all the links in the email, so don't worry about it. And I will understand how not to make things blurry, because I just learned how to do that.
Yes.
And Mary will be here, and Laura will be here.
And it'll be a different link next week.
It'll
right?
be, don't worry, but this link was a one-time.
You'll get a new link in an email, right?
But get excited, because next week it's party time, and you'll all be manuscripts.
Choo-choo, get on the train again.
Choo-choo. All right. Well, thank you guys all so much. The replay will be up tomorrow. You'll get a link for that. And we will see you all next week. And again, Mary, thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm not kidding. This has been over a year of work on this blueprint, and I am so excited for it to finally be out in the world. I cannot wait to share it with you.
Mary, you have spent more time with my wife over the last year than I have, so.
I count myself lucky.
All right. Thank you all, guys,
All right.
and have a great night.
Good night.